Hey everyone, welcome to Tales in Text. I'm your host Nisha, and it's been a long time. It's been almost a month and a half since I met all of you, had a talk with you. So I do apologize for the delay. Professional commitments kept me busy, but here I am back again with my videos. So today I thought I'd take a moment to give you all Mahabharata lovers a bit of an update about what's going on with my reading of the critical edition of the Mahabharata. In the previous video, in the Mahabharata playlist, I had left you with the review of Volume 2 and had told you how I would be starting Volume 3 immediately. So this video is just going to be a bit of a brief about how Volume 3 reading is going, a couple of new insights that I gained through the Volume 3, I mean whatever I've read so far, and also a related blog post that I produced as a result of my reading the Volume 3, and where I'm situated right now in the entire Mahabharata universe and the Mahabharata readathon. So if this is something that interests you, stick around. So here is the Mahabharata Volume 3, and as you can see, it represents the game of dice, or rather the consequences of the game of dice. Volume 2 ended with the game of dice and how the Pandavas and their wife Draupadi were exiled into the forest, and they had to leave and they had to go into the forest to spend 14 years. And so this book actually talks of, to a large extent, their experiences living in the forest and what happens to every member of the group, as they are living in the forest and just biding their time to finish those 14 years in exile so they can go back and wrest the kingdom away from Duryodhana and his posse. So far, as you can see, there have been some flags that are put in to mark important things, but I think the most important learning that I got through the Volume 3 is that of the Tirthas. So before I get ahead of myself, let me just say that I am currently in the very first parva of Volume 3, which is the Tirtha Yatra Parva. So in order to spend their time effectively, efficiently, and to actually get something out of their exile, Yudhishthira decides that the entire group, sans Arjuna, because Arjuna's gone in order to get weapons from Indra and from Shiva and from the other deities. In fact, his experiences with Kairata, that is Shiva, were explored in Volume 2. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, please. I think that was in Volume 2. And so he's actually not in the picture right now. So what we're looking at in Tirtha Yatra Parva is Yudhishthira, Bhima, Nakula, Sahadeva, Draupadi, along with Dhaumya and a bunch of other rishis and priests and other holy men and their families. They've all kind of gone on a yatra to the various tirthas across the country. Now, when I say across the country, I of course do not mean modern day India or what modern day India looks like, or the places that are considered sacred in modern day India. I do of course mean country from the perspective of what the population or what the people would have been aware of, all those millennia ago. So, to a very large extent, when you are reading the Tirtha Yatra Parva, the first half of the Parva actually deals with a listing of all of the places that these people visit, right? The first section of this Parva just talks of places, many of which are concentrated in central India, current day, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, sometimes even Haryana, and that central India, sort of North India, central India region. And as you continue reading, you start discovering new places which kind of move even beyond that scope, going either towards the northeast or to the complete north, towards Kashmir, or to the east towards Gujarat, or even down to the south. Now, when you are reading this parva, especially when you're looking at the places, one of the most important observations that you will find is that there are quite a few places which bear the same name even today. So for example, Pushkar Lake is something that many of you might be familiar with, and Pushkara was a very sacred lake even during the time of the Mahabharata. Now, of course, there is a lot of debate about, I'm not just talking about Pushkara here, I'm just talking about all of the Tirthas in general, about how many of these places can actually be traced along the map of India, thereby indicating or giving a rough idea of the places where the Pandavas moved around during their exile. And by extension, this mapping out of places which exist even today can in one way prove that some form of this epic did take place in reality. Now we know that a lot of the magical elements of the epic certainly could not have taken place, and there is often a very practical explanation for these occurrences, or it could just be imaginative embellishments by the public, whoever read these stories and they were inspired by it. And so these tirthas, these physical places, in a large way do kind of act as a proof that in some shape or form, some version of the Mahabharata did take place. Now, if you remember from one of my very early videos of the Mahabharata readathon, I think it was in the review of the volume 1, I am not very sure, I did mention how Bibek Debroy, who is the translator of the critical edition, which I use, has mentioned in the introduction that what could be real, what could have been the real Mahabharata incident was the theft of the cows that is explained and explored in detail in the Virata Parva, which takes place significantly later during the 14th year of exile of the Pandavas. So in the introduction, Dr. Debroy mentions how because of the way in which the theft and the recovery of the cattle has been described in detail, and also of the fact that how in ancient India cattle used to be a source of economic strength or financial strength, and how cattle used to be a way of a sort of money or monetary symbol that would facilitate trade, it is highly likely that the Mahabharata battle was actually a battle about ownership of cattle and not about a kingdom or of women. So essentially, a lot of these places that are mentioned lend credence to this theory, in that because these places existed during the Mahabharata era, and because these places exist even today, not all of the Tirthas mentioned in the book, mind you, but many of them still do exist with the same name. And in fact, Dr. Debroy has given copious notes in each chapter wherever the places that he's mentioned have actually been tagged to real places in India. So if there's a place, for example, a lot of the places in Gujarat, for example, Dwarka, all of these places can actually be mapped in India even today. So when it comes to places that have been geographically tagged to the places mentioned in the Mahabharata, to the Tirthas mentioned in the Mahabharata, Dr. Debroy has given lots of notes about the location of the places, the new names in case the names of the cities or the villages have undergone a change, or any specific natural feature such as a pond or a lake or a hill or a valley that was worshipped before and has kind of now become a part of a larger geographical landscape. He's mentioned it in the notes, thereby giving you a lot of information about how the geography of India in certain ways has continued to remain the same over the course of many millennia. So it was a very interesting read in terms of actually looking at every place. And incidentally, because I didn't want to lose track of the names, I've actually gone ahead and made a note of all the names here. In fact, these are just 2 pages of the many pages in which I've written it. I've also written it back here, as you can see, and I've also kind of squeezed them in here. So I've done quite a bit of jugaad. A very Indian thing, and if you're an Indian, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. So I have. Okay, there are a lot of kids near my neighborhood and they're just like having a jolly time. So please excuse me for any noise, background noise. Okay, so I did make a note of these here, but I really wanted to make these names of these tirthas available to everybody else, especially if they didn't have access to the critical edition of the Mahabharata, or if they just wanted to know of the various tirthas, just get acquainted with them, and or maybe perhaps even plan a visit to some of the tirthas that are still present today and that can still be visited today. And in order to do that, I actually made a blog post listing every single tirtha mentioned in volume 3. All of you may remember, if you've watched a couple of my previous videos, where I do talk of my blog post, or rather my blog, which I maintain, which is called Story So Wild. So I went ahead and wrote a blog called The Sacred Tirthas of Ancient India, and here it is. This is what it looks like. Yep, I hope it is visible. Right, so this is Story So Wild, and this is what the article looks like. I have gone ahead and written a variety of things here. For example, why study the sacred tirthas, and given my perspective of why we need to study the tirthas today. Then I've written about the various tirthas mentioned in the Mahabharata. For example, this is where the main list of the tirthas starts. As you can see, it's numbered, and I've written it in the order in which they appear in the book. So far, the main list of tirthas actually consists of 312 tirthas, as you can see over here. And I've also made a list of the 3 most important tirthas that the Mahabharata has mentioned. Of all of these 312, which are the 3 most important. Then there is also a different list in the book of direction-specific tirthas, that is in the north, east, west, and south. So I've gone ahead and I've mentioned those as well. Right? And before I ended this article, I actually have also written a note on the river Saraswati, because the river Saraswati makes many appearances in the list of tirthas in some shape or form. The river Saraswati is involved in many of the tirthas. So I've gone ahead and done some research about the history of the river Saraswati and what historians, archaeologists, and geologists actually believe where Saraswati was located before it sort of disappeared or became extinct, and some of the theories about the river Saraswati, what could have happened to the river, where it was located, and just some other information. So it was a super exciting thing to research for me, and I'm sure you'll enjoy reading this. And then I've gone ahead and I've written about the loins of the world and altars of Prajapati. And my theory is that these are the list of places which were some of the cradles of life or cradles of creation, possibly biodiversity hotspots even. And that's just my theory. So yeah, you can do your own research and find out and let me know what you think of this. And finally, I end the article about how nature is equal to God, and it's a sort of a note about how Hinduism is actually a celebration of nature and nature spirits, and how, in the end, Dhaumya even tells Yudhishthira how, rich people can afford to conduct sacrifices and do a lot of other things, but for the poor person, visiting tirthas is as good as, or sometimes even better than, performing sacrifices that are expensive. And for people who can't afford to go on these pilgrimages to tirthas, or perhaps it is not possible because of, let's say, old age or disability, or because of their gender, then even just reciting the names of these tirthas can cleanse them of their sins and just to energize them body, mind, and soul. And to me, this is once again a reflection of how nature is a rejuvenating factor, how nature is that magical entity which enriches us body, mind, and spirit. So how the sacred sites in Hinduism are all natural landscapes which gave life to so many other creatures and to humans. So yeah, volume 3 has been quite interesting in that sense. Another thing about volume 3 is that this was what happened in the first part of Yatra Parva. In the second half of Tirtha Yatra Parva, we look at some of the ancient myths associated with various places and various kings and deities. So this section, I've not actually completed the parva yet. There are about maybe 40 pages left for me to complete this parva. It's a pretty chunky parva. So these stories are, for context and perspective, they were considered to be myths even during the time of the Pandava exile. So the Ramayana Mahabharata are considered myths for us today because they happened so many ancient, in such an ancient time, so many years ago. But the myths and the stories that Dharmya shares with Yudhishthira in the Tirthayatra Parva about kings and gods and demons, they were considered myths during the time of the Pandava exile. So you can imagine how far back into time these stories sort of percolate, right? Or they go back into. So these stories are super interesting. There's a lot of stuff happening. So if you actually go ahead and read the volume 3, I suggest taking your time with it. Perhaps even rereading certain sections, because some of these stories are just, there are so many stories and some of them are so complicated in the sense that there are so many characters, so many things are happening. So it is really difficult to sort of keep track of what's going on. And it's very easy to forget what you've read, and I have actually had that experience where I've forgotten what I've read and I had to go back and reread it. So yeah, it is definitely promising. It is a very interesting parva overall, very large, very chunky one, and it sort of leads us forward into the Pandava exile and gives us a sense, of the geography of the country, of the culture and practices of the people, and just it gives us a sense of, I think, more than anything for me, this parva is sort of like a reality check of how people used to spend their time, before industrialization, before the advent of the internet, before globalization, just in a time which was rustic and simple, where for people a way to spend time would be to visit places or to share stories or to just sit down and talk about philosophical matters. So it's a kind of like a reality check, and in a way it's also very soothing. That's the best way I can explain. So maybe once you read it yourself, you can actually let me know how you felt after reading this parva. Now, so far so good, right? Unfortunately, I've hit my regular Mahabharata reading slump, the wall. I've hit the reading wall. You know me, and if you followed my Mahabharata readathon videos, you know how in every book at least once I hit a reading slump, I hit a reading wall, and it needs a couple of weeks for me to sort of work through that in order to kind of shake off that slump and just get back to the books again. So I'm now sort of stuck in a rut, and at best I'm just reading 1 page a day, which is not good enough considering that I have a long way to go in terms of completing the Mahabharata. But what is more concerning for me personally is that after the critical edition of the Mahabharata is over, that is, I have volume 4, and apart from that 6 other volumes within the Mahabharata critical edition that I need to complete. But I also have the Harivamsha, and I also have many of the Puranas that I still need to read. So 16 more books to go, or 16 and a half books to go, before I complete the whatever, the epic collection, as I call it, that I have right now. So it is quite concerning that I'm able to get through just 1 page a day, and I really need to work through this slump. But I also know through experience, of reading the previous 2 volumes, that if and even reading the Ramayana, oh my god, I made such a big blunder with the Ramayana. I have actually spoken about that, I think, in one of my earlier videos, where I didn't listen to my mind or my body when I had hit the reading slump, and I tried to force myself to read, and I ended up having to reread the entire thing because I just kind of dropped the book for a really long time because I just couldn't go ahead. So I know now that it's okay if I take a step back for a month or so from these books, but then I kind of come back later, renewed, energized. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. So this could be my last update about the Mahabharata for at least another couple of weeks while I work through that reading slump and just kind of climb over that reading wall and get back to things. Hopefully, it's been like about a week and a half now since I've kind of stopped reading the Mahabharata. So I'm hoping that by mid-July at least I can sort of come back to it and read it in the way that is sort of productive. Until then, I will definitely come back with other book reviews, other perhaps tarot and oracle reviews, or other exciting content. So yeah, don't fret, I will be back with Mahabharata. This is a priority for me, and I'm excited to share my journey with you. And if you are reading the critical edition of the Mahabharata, please do let me know which volume you are in currently and how's it going for you. Do you experience reading slumps when you're reading these books? Let me know. And do you have any techniques to getting over the reading slumps? So share your feedback. All right, and if you have completed the critical edition of the Mahabharata, let me know how that went for you as well. And even about the Puranas, have you started reading them? Are they on your wish list? I will probably do another video showing my Purana books, whatever I have right now, perhaps in another video, so do stick around for that. And if you stuck around with me so far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time on Tales in Text. Bye bye.